employees work.
Okay, so with this in our conversation, really my view was, I felt when I was earlier in my career that I had to pave my own path. And I totally had the example of Janice. I got to be with her side by side for a lot of years. I had her example. I had Amanda's example. And so if you don't know all three of our stories of how we navigated having children and going in and out of work with that, I encourage you to just reach out to us and talk to us about it. But for me, I had a childcare situation in my home, and so I didn't feel like I had to commit to a perfect mold or a perfect expectation of anyone. And in fact, I didn't like the expectations or the molds that I had seen in the past. I wanted to do something that worked for me. And so I have had to I've had to try to be communicative in what I need. I've been very flexible with my work hours. I would have a baby and work part-time for a little bit and then kind of work my way back up in hours because there was more to do. And I liked to work. So I was doing more and my kids were taken care of. And so I kept doing that and then I'd back off again. But there was not some, predetermined budget report I could use to fit my life. And so I mean, Janice talked about this already, where we had to communicate and talk about what worked for me. And throughout my career, as I was being at different levels, there was a specific time when another team member was leaving, and I said, you know what? I can step in to do her work. I can re-engage. And I made a conscious decision. I didn't realize that I wasn't really engaged before then. I was doing work for clients. I thought I was involved, but I realized at that time that there was a lot more that I could do. I could be a leader in our team if I said, hey, I'll step up and do this. And I remember the day still that I made that determination. I went and met with my husband at his work. He's a school teacher. I took my kid in there with him and said, hey, I think I'm supposed to do this. And then that changed the whole course of my engagement for the rest of the part-time years that I had and since. And essentially the mold, I had to be willing to think about how my life would fit. And I had to be willing to consider, what does Squire need? Because if my life's not going to fit with Squire, then that's a whole different conversation, a whole different mentality to have. But I was very sure that I could make it work. And it took thinking outside the box. It took conversations that say, well, no, I don't think I should have to go full time in order to make manager. I think I'm providing value. I'm leading the team. I've got all this engagement to become the leader at a manager level. I don't think that I need to be a full-time person in order to be a manager. And I would have a conversation with different partners and talk about these. And sometimes it was a very emotional because not everyone agreed with me. And but I just felt like I didn't want to go anywhere else. Squire was amazing. It was my family. But I also knew that I needed to make it work for me too. And so my mold turned into, I am flexible with my time. I mean, specifically last night, I worked till 2:30 in the morning because I chose to do other things with my time the last few days during the day. But at the same time, when it's time for me to go to the kids' open house during school, if I feel like that's an important place to be, that's blocked off my calendar, just as if I was meeting with a client. Like, I feel like the flexibility has gone both ways. And because I am determined to make it work for Squire, I'm determined to make it work for me. There's been no mold. There's been no formula, except a win-win scenario every time. And I've loved it.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. I really think that, like, in society, just in general, we're seeing things are changing. People don't work 8 to 5 and come home. And, you know, with all the working from home and all the things that happened with COVID and the adjustments, we're seeing a lot of change. And I think that we can be a part of that progress and saying, okay, maybe there's a different way to do it and maybe even do it better. So being willing to kind of maybe try some things out and push the mold and say, well, this is going to work better for me. I'm going to try this. Does this work for my company? Like, is this still going to work for both of us? So kind of being willing to maybe stretch out and think outside the box and think about, how can I do this differently, right? So I just think that, like, everyone's situation is different, right? As different as snowflakes, right? No one has the exact same situation. No one is in the exact same spot. So our solution has to be different, right? And I think that as we talk to people, we can find things that work for us. There may be something that someone's doing that's going to work for me, but may not work for someone else, or maybe part of what they're doing works for me. And so I think that goes along kind of with this changing the mold, is that because we are so different, because our situations are so different, and because they're constantly changing, right, that we have to kind of adjust and find ways to work around that. I personally am starting, I'm in my 40s and I'm starting out at the bottom, right? Like, I had a career for a while and I stayed home with kids and now I'm back at it. And my career is going to look so different from someone else. I may not make it as far as I want before I decide to retire, but that's okay. Like, I am enjoying where I'm at right now. And I'm glad to be back at work, and it's been a big adjustment to go to school and work and kids and all of that. But, like, I'm happy where I'm at. So it makes it worth it, right? The other thing I wanted to talk about is that things happen slowly, right? We can't change things overnight. And I recently read this book called Atomic Habits. And I won't go into it. It's a good book. But one of the things it's talked about is just how small little changes can make a big impact over time. And the analogy they used was there was a cycling team, I think it was the UK cycling team, and they brought in a new manager, and he was like, okay, I'm just going to start making small changes. So he was able to, like, change the pedals on the bike and take off like 2 ounces from the weight of the bike. And he did all these, like, little changes, but overall, because all those little changes, when they added up, they started winning races and started to get really good because of all these little changes. And I think sometimes in our life, we kind of want to come in and say, okay, I've been working 50 hours a week, it's too much, I need to go to 40. And maybe that can't happen right away. Maybe there needs to be smaller steps to get you to where you want to be. Or maybe you're feeling like, okay, I go home at night and I'm still feeling like I have to work. What are, like, there's got to be little things maybe that you can change to make it feel like that. It's hard to do something overnight, right? And I think anytime we try to make a drastic change, it usually doesn't work. At least that's how it is for me. So, like, so I want you to kind of think about, like, little things that you can do that kind of make things easier. Like, I went on a vacation this summer and I had alerts on my phone from Teams. I thought, well, I'm just going to turn off on my trip so I don't, because I can't help, like, my email. I have, like, several email boxes that have Squire on my phone, and when I see the number, that there's a number there, I can't help but not look at it. Like, I don't know if it's like a weakness of mine, maybe people are good at that, but I can't. I see there's a message in there, even though it's at nighttime, I'm not going to do anything about it, I can't help but look at it, right? So to, like, hide those things maybe when you're on vacation, like something little like that. So does anyone have anything in their lives that they've done, like little changes that maybe have made work-life balance easier for you?
One thing that I do that is actually, like, I usually, like, for a while, like, when, like, I was not at work, I told myself, okay, don't check any emails, don't check anything, because then it'll add to your stress. But then I was recently with Whitney, and she said she does the opposite. So the night before, she goes through and looks at all the emails so that she can mentally prepare herself the next day, knowing all the stuff she has to do. And so it's interesting just to see how, like, I do that versus how she does that, and how it works for both of us. Like, some people do check their phone and it does help them because then they're better prepared the next day. Whereas for me, my anxiety would make it harder for me to focus because I am thinking about all the things I have to do.
Awesome, that's perfect. I also, oh yeah, go ahead.
When I just started, Nate Nugent made a comment to me that was really helpful. He talked about how like we have all these moments where the client comes to us and they're in a state of like, it's an emergency, oh no, or like we kind of put that like deadline on ourselves or whatever, and so we have this like sense of like I have to get this done, it's urgent, whatever. And he talked about how he'd gotten to a state where his clients thought he liked working at night, and he would get messages, hey, you know, if you're working tonight, can you just like take care of this? And he realized that he needed to set different boundaries so that they understood that that wasn't his preference. And he talked about how, like, yes, there are some deadlines that really do like count, but a lot of times, if they're messaging you on a Friday night, you can get to it on Monday, and it's fine. And you like if it's 5 o'clock and they send you a message, you can get to it the next day. And like he just talked about how like, you know, there are some things that matter more than others, and learning where to like draw that line and say, okay, that's very important, and I will get to that tomorrow.
Yeah.
And being okay with that and saying, you know, like I have done a good day's work, and I'll continue tomorrow, and that's okay. And I thought that was very kind of him to tell me that at the beginning of my working.
It's so much easier to set the expectation up front than try to go backwards, right? So we've kind of been talking about how we're not letting work life flow into our personal life, but what about the opposite way? Does anyone? Oh, yeah.
But I found this on the web.
Sorry.
Chrissy, did you have a comment?
We have someone in.
Can you hear me now? Sorry. I'm in a weird location. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. I was echoing everywhere. I found that I had to learn to use my phone smarter, and I turn on this focus, and during work hours, it automatically removes all notifications that are from my personal apps. And then I just, during the opposite, I stop all notifications from work apps, like when I'm not working, and it just helps me like compartmentalize my life a little bit better, because I'm constantly doing that dual factor authentication. I look at my app and go, oh, you know, my family's doing da 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 da, or my neighbor needs da 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 da, and it's just so distracting. So just stopping like the flow of information into my phone has, like segregating it, I should say, has just been really, really helpful to me.
That's a great idea. I also need to learn how to get my kids to stop calling me at work.
So,
Get distracted.
in
Do you
Salt
guys
Lake,
in Salt Lake have-
What did you say?
oh, we have a comment.
We have 2 comments.
So kind of picking back off of Christine, we can also do that with our brains. We can train our brains to be present in what we're doing. So we're not, when we're doing things at home, we don't need to be thinking about all the work we have to do. And when we're working, we don't have to think about all the things that we need to do at work or at home. So one of the ways you can do that is just focusing on what you're doing. If you're washing dishes, focus on how the water feels. Focusing on thinking about how you're going to get this dish so clean, or things like that. Or if you're folding laundry or playing with your kids, make sure that if you start to think about all those things that you have to do at work, train your brain to bring it back to what you're doing in that moment, and that will help with the anxiety levels of the opposite. And the opposite is true for work. You know, if you're at work, don't be thinking about things at home. Just focus on and like compartmentalize. If you're going to be working, be working. Don't think about home stuff. Don't worry about home stuff unless it's an emergency, obviously. So that's one way that we can help ourselves get that work-life balance, is making sure that we are present in the moment. And then Janelle,
Thank you.
Yeah, something we were talking about, how if you're on vacation, you either feel pressure to check your email or you know you're going to come back to a ton of emails, and either way that's kind of a bummer because it's hard to enjoy vacation. So what I've started doing is on my out of office assistant notification, client or for outside people, I say, you know, I'm out of the office for this day. If you need immediate assistance, please call, you know, this number. Otherwise, I'll return your message. Instead of saying when I return, I say within a week of my return. So people aren't expecting some immediate response, and that gives me time to kind of come back slowly and not just be slammed with a ton of stuff. And it usually doesn't take me a week, but at least I set some expectations that I'm not gonna just jump right back on and get everything done the first day I'm back. So that helps me relax a little bit more.
Awesome, I like that one. Okay, so the last thing we're gonna do is to kind of help continue the conversation, but maybe in smaller groups, is we're gonna break out and play a game. And I will fully admit that it's pretty corny. And so, see, how do I? Oh, there we go. So hopefully, so it's an online game. So we're gonna break out into, Camille's gonna break people out in teams online, so like you can just drop off. I'll put the link in the chat. But the point of the game is really just to continue the conversation, to help you kind of think about things that maybe will help you think about, like, how is my life going now? What can I change? What can I do better? So this, like, if you click on this dice in the corner here, that will roll your dice. You've got your board game pieces you can move around with your mouse. And then if you see the boxes that have an eye in them, you click on one. It says like draw a conversation card. So those are the exclamations, and then there's the questions. And then it just